told me to tell you that since yesterday his internet has been cut and he's been trying to
Who?
contact Mustafa.
Mustafa. Okay.
بيقول لي since yesterday his internet has been cut and he's been trying to contact them. He sent you an email shortly, but he told me to tell you that he might struggle to make it on time for the presentation.
But he will have his presentation today, or he's not sure? Because I haven't received any email. I just checked out my email.
لما هو he told me he will be sending he will still be sending an email. He's still trying to contact the
to get in, with the internet. Okay.
So after he contacts them, he should send you an email if he does miss the class, of course.
Okay. Okay. So you will have your presentation, and Jasper, he's not here yet as well. Jasper, yeah. Okay, so let's start the lecture. We're going to have the presentations toward the end. So I leave like last 15 minutes or something. It depends on how many presentations we are going to have. Okay?
Okay.
So we're gonna start with like the Sisi regime, and we need to examine how new elite settlements, these kind of settlements have evolved, and with kind of erosion of any social bargains and this kind of total marginalization of the civil society or the social forces. So the question we're trying to answer this lecture and the next one, we're going to investigate or to look into how this new regime consolidated its authority, especially after 2014, and the process was consolidated even further after 2018. I'm not sure if you did the readings, because I need to go through like the last slide of the last lecture, because it's very important in order to investigate this very formative moment, because it was very it has like consequences for the establishment of the new regime. So what we stopped at like this kind of geopolitics, the civil war in Syria, that was even like before the expansion of the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq, ISIS, but it was like civil war was going on in Syria, and again like another one in Libya and in Yemen. So it gave like chance for like the opponents of the Brotherhood's regime to legitimize their action of cracking down and withdrawing or retreating any kind of idioms, revolutionary idioms, and to replace it with haybat al-dawla or reverence of the state. So the process actually culminated in like cracking down on the Brotherhood sit-ins, and then a transitional period where when they wrote or drafted a new constitution that was ratified in January 2014, and then it was kind of the reassertion of the authority of the state institutions, especially the intelligence and the security apparatuses. So in order to look into this particular moment in some detail, we need to investigate or to examine these kind of opposition interactions and choices made in this uncertain environment. So this is especially like the 2013 moment, and you have like two of the readings, abortive transition, and the one about threat perception. So you have here like the first piece, like on abortive democratic transition. So it kind of focused mainly on comparison between like the choices made in 2011 moment and then 2013 moment. So it's basically how like social actors and we answered how social how social forces actually managed to tilt the balance of power between them and the state, and they managed to remove Mubarak in 2011 with the help, of course, with the SCAF and the military establishment. So it was kind of a capitalization on the factions or the rafts within the ruling elites, and this enabled that was like, you know, one dimension. And the other one, they increased their leverage by establishing, you know, this kind of or they gathered around, you know, common goal, which was like, you know, removing Mubarak. This increased, you know, their like leverage and the bargaining position as they portrayed themselves as pro-democracy forces. So it was kind of they had like common demands and common frame. And what the literature mentioned something about cooperative differentiation. So they had different ideological background, but they had common goal, which was like, at this point, it was like removing Mubarak, but they didn't have any kind of democratic or coherent democratic project or clear vision about what kind of polity would emerge after removing Mubarak. So they struggled, you know, about the formation of the new regime, and even, you know, the electoral process right after disposing Mubarak. So they had like, initially they didn't have this kind of accommodation stance towards, you know, the old regime defenders. They actually asked for like, you know, the fall of the regime, and perhaps like, you know, the head of the regime, but the regime itself or the main, you know, state apparatuses remained intact. So what's needed after that point in order to look into the 2013 moment, it was kind of disaggregation of this society. Instead of looking into, or instead of like, you know, calling it as or perceiving it as a coherent whole, we need to break it down into like, you know, different players and different forces, because it's pro-democracy forces. It's kind of it's not accurate, and it didn't actually capture what happened at that point. So this would allow for kind of close examination of the efforts of different oppositional forces to offset the state power or the old power centers, or the old establishment, and to what extent they collude, you know, in order to reinstate, you know, this new authoritarian regime. So the one on the threat perception, it basically, the central argument here, it was like kind of fast-paced transition, and during this uncertain environment, there is kind of like flaws of information, which would cause like kind of information overload when it comes to like, you know, mental processing of these flaws of information. So this led to like, you know, like gave space, you know, to judgment and irrationality while making decisions or forming opinions. So in this kind of fast-paced transition and this information overload, it was kind of overestimation of the threat. So what's called like threat perception. And this it was a function of like these kind of cognitive biases. So the article basically draws on two main biases, or like heuristics, or cognitive heuristics. So for information processing, you have like two mental processes. The first one is kind of you either depend on your intuition or your judgment in order to form, you know, opinions, and then or reasoning. So you have like, you know, a systematic and thorough processing based on some facts. So when we talked about this kind of information overload and cognitive bias, so we mainly focus on like these kind of intuition and judgment and irrationalities or irrationality in politics. So it's not, it has nothing to do with this kind of systematic processing of the information. So the article draws mainly on two main biases. The first one, availability, and the second one is representative. So the availability means while forming your opinion, so you base your opinion on or like the decision on the the more immediate examples, you know, that pop up to your mind, you know, at this point. So when you evaluate, you know, certain situation, so you kind of depend on the more accessible data or examples, you know, you have in order to form your opinion. Or representative bias. So according to this bias, this is how the kind of the mental processing, or the how you process, how your brain actually processes the information load. So you either like kind of oversimplify you don't compare, you know, between your context and the precursor, you know, that led to the other context, you know, that led to a kind of failure. So in the case of Egypt at this point, it was like, you know, kind of overestimation of the threat of the brotherhood, because either like, you know, the people, basically, you know, the opposition here, they make this comparison between, like, you know, the situation in Egypt and the situation in Syria, for example. So this is like the most, like, as a representative case. So without paying attention to the complexity of the differences of the social composition and the context, you know, in these two countries. So Syria, as you know, it's like, you know, the Alawites or the Alawis actually dominated as a minority, dominated. So sectarian politics, you know, was like it became immensely salient, and they had like too many regional players and proxy wars, you know, were going on. Like the case of Algeria or Hamas in Gaza, or like these kind of, when Islamists, you know, came to power, this kind of that was the available, or the like the latest events, you know, people had, you know, in their mind while evaluating and forming, you know, their opinion, while investigating in some detail, you know, the Egyptian context. They would, like, you know, recognize, and the central point here, it's not like, you know, the citizens or the, like, you know, ordinary people, you know, would do this. It was like the political parties and the organization of the political parties that would have kind of mitigated, you know, this functions of the function of the cognitive biases. So if you have, like, you know, a organization and, like, you know, political party, like the political parties of the different political forces, like the National Salvation Front, for example. So this would correct for, you know, these kind of biases, and would cross-check, you know, this information. So before, like, you know, rushing into impulsively into certain actions. So here, like, you know, numbers, like, you know, the Brotherhood actually in the first round in the presidential elections, you know, they got like 25% of the national vote. So this is like the electoral weight. So and in the second round, actually, he won the Brotherhood, you know, candidate, you know, attained office and won with a very narrow margin, you know, with Shafiq. And it was like, it indicated, you know, this deep-seated division in the society. And that was, like, you know, again, the electoral weight of the Brotherhood. And when it comes to the how they governed, during, you know, this short tenure in office, so they had, like, to share power with the military establishment, and they had, you know, to appease, you know, some state institution. So you need to investigate the main the location of power, or the real power centers, you know, within the state. And in the first round of the presidential elections as well, like the three candidates that they were portrayed as like revolutionary candidates, like Sabahi and Abu Futuh and Khalid Ali, they together like gained 40%. So it was like, you know, like an indicator, you know, about the electoral weight of these forces. So the point here was like kind of the overestimation of, like, you know, the threat of Islamic extremism was, like, you know, focusing mainly on with the function of these biases, by focusing mainly on certain events or eye-catching events, with the absence of political parties or organization, that would like mitigate, you know, the and correct for these cognitive biases, and would modify and block, you know, these biases. It was like, you know, total absence. As I mentioned, like the National Salvation Front as well, like it came into being because it had like common enemy rather than having like a common vision or a common goal. This like eventually led to like withdrawing, you know, the support for democracy that they initially, you know, called for. So this is like would take us to like, you know, like another point about when disaggregating, you know, society, or looking into, you know, the political forces or the social forces, this kind of pro-democracy forces. So we need to investigate in some detail the losers' behaviors, like the values and the beliefs of the losers after losing, you know, the transitional elections. So when they according to the literature as well, when the expectations, you know, are high about like, you know, winning, you know, the elections, or about like, you know, having a share in political power, so like people would like not like losing, you know, the founding elections or the transitional elections would like push people not to withdraw from the political, like from the political process altogether, but actually taking action by adjudicating, you know, to, in this case, you know, to the military. So the partly, or like, you know, part of it, you know, their expectations about, you know, future rounds of the game. So if the electoral game is kind of iterative, and they might have like a chance, if they stand a chance, you know, in the future to win the elections, so they might have a stake, you know, in maintaining and preserving, you know, the democratic gains, or the as in a sense, like the electoral processes in this sense. So if they believe that they don't have like a chance, they stand no chance, you know, in the future, so they would like, you know, terminate it. So they would discount, you know, any kind of future chance, and they would like, you know, terminate the entire game. Any question?
No.
Okay. One of the readings as well. So, and I actually like, I encourage you to read it. It has like, it has nothing to do with the Egyptian context, but Wickham chapter as well. She tries to compare between different like different strands, you know, or of the brotherhood. So the point, you know, she tried to make here, it's kind of instead of like painting them all with a broad brush, so you need to bring the context, you know, back into the analysis. So she focused mainly on Jordan and Kuwait and Morocco, and obviously these are like, you know, monarchies. But again, the central point is like, you know, explicitly she made like a point regarding, you know, this separation between the da'wah, like the brotherhood, as kind of a religious group, like, you know, they had like a mission with regard to call for Islam and establish the moralities and the ethics, and the political arms, you know, of these, or the political parties of these movements. So like this is one point. And the other point, she actually implicitly she mentioned something about, you know, the Development and Justice Party in Morocco, that it was not like the only party, or and Kuwait as well, the constitutional movement, the Islamic constitutional movement in Kuwait as well. So they are not like, you know, for Morocco, for example, they had like long tradition of the very presence or existence of liberal and secular forces. So like there is kind of a balance of power between like Islamist and non-Islamist, like secular and liberal forces as well in Morocco. So it became very difficult for Muslim Brotherhood, or their like, you know, the Development and Justice Party, and its like historical development of the party as well. It became very difficult for them to claim any kind of dominant position, or to have like this self-assertion attitude or approach towards the non-Islamist opposition. And in Kuwait as well, so they had never managed to gain more than like 12% of the parliamentary seats. And because, you know, they are like, you know, one like brotherhood, like is one trend, you know, of oppositional forces there. And in Morocco as well, they had like recent development from they had been struggling because of the existence of the king, so they had to play politics from within, you know, the boundaries, you know, laid down or established by the king. So they had like these struggles, you know, to carve out space from within, you know, like the existing regime. So that's why after like, you know, being in exile for quite some time, since like, you know, the early 70s until like mid 90s. So they tried, you know, to approach, you know, the as an institution, the monarch as an institution, in order to play politics. And after, you know, several rejections, they tried to build an alliance or a coalition with other parties in order to have like, you know, a political space or in order to play politics. So they had like a stake in maintaining, you know, the space, you know, they managed to carve out or to take, you know, from within the regime. And it was very clear after the uprisings, you know, when like other non-Islamist forces and like protesters, they asked for more than the constitutional amendments offered by the king. So they refused, and they refused to escalate, you know, the opposition with the king, and actually they played, you know, from within the boundaries. And in Kuwait as well, they have never received more than, like, this is like, you know, the upper limit, 12% of the parliamentary seats. And they had like other different oppositional forces like nationalists, and although like, you know, their like, you know, social basis and power, you know, faded away over time, but still they had like, you know, other like Shia and Salafi, different streams and different trends, you know, of the Islamists as well. And in Jordan as well, they had like, you know, this Islamic Action Front Party. They had like, you know, some of the Brotherhood, actually they got like included into the existing system. So this inclusion like, so made them like, you know, this made them have like kind of an interest and stake in perpetuating, you know, the existing polity that was like, you know, throughout the 80s and 90s. And the actually in Jordan and Morocco, like if you compare this, you know, to Egypt, they had like some ministerial positions and posts as well. So they were like, you know, they were part, you know, of the establishment or of the political dynamics, you know, that had been like, you know, going on during the 80s and 90s, and in Kuwait, like after the second Gulf War. So the point here is like comparing, you know, different, don't underestimate, you know, the context and the perhaps like implicitly, you know, you can understand from this chapter as well, like, you know, the way, you know, of the Brotherhood or the Islamic groups, you know, in relation to so you should avail yourself of the entire oppositional map, and how the positionality or the weight of the Brotherhood in relation to different other forces. Okay, so back to that was like, you know, very like, you know, constitute like very kind of formative point to constitute a new regime that emerged, you know, with the Sisi elections in 2014, and then the second term in 2018. So the central point here, how actually through like this series of legal regulations and rules, the new regime actually legitimized or consolidated its authority, and legally closed off, you know, almost every avenues of peaceful and potential opposition or dissent. So that happened through like, you know, different stages that and through different like as we are going to see, like constitutional amendments as well, like issuing, you know, some legal regulations and like, you know, crafting a new institution that gradually led to like, you know, a significant constitutional amendments that led to that entrenched actually the power or the position of the presidency as an institution, and in relation to and protection of the military as an establishment with the control of the president over this institution. So we're gonna like see how this happened gradually. So first, like how like closing off, you know, these or like, you know, curtailing the social activism and restricting associational space first, and then different like constitutional amendments or articles that actually strengthened the presidency as an institution or the executive branch, not the entire branch, but the president himself, and then the relationship between the military and the president and the society as a whole. So right after, in like 1 year after, like after like the crafting, you know, the constitution, so the regime actually undertook some new measures in order to restrict or to tighten its control over society or social forces. So in July 2004, these are like the most like the most important legislations or rules that had like, you know, that were like consequential for restricting, you know, these associational space and reshaping, you know, the relationship between state and society. So the regime actually with this kind of highlighting and emphasizing the national unity and the national security doctrine. So it had like, you know, it had like, you know, popular kind of acceptance of cracking down or suppressing, you know, any kind of political opposition or any kind of political challenge. So in July 2014, the regime had a proposal in order to force all the NGOs to dissolve themselves and to register with the Minister of Social Affairs. So that was basically in order to abolish or to erode, you know, the branches of the brotherhood, the charitable and social networks, this kind of education and charity activities, and other social services. So it basically it gave the regime a chance to confiscate, you know, the assets of the brotherhoods, the brotherhoods assets, and to actually and after like grouping them as like, or framing them as a threat to the public order or the national security. So it was like allowed to erode, you know, or to eradicate, you know, all the branches of the brotherhood's social networks, and to actually to foster, you know, these kind of anti-terror legislation that would legitimize, you know, expropriation of their assets. And then this kind of counter-terrorism, you know, rules or regulations, you know, were codified into, you know, a law in August 2014, and it actually, again, it did legitimize, you know, the use of force and violence against, you know, any kind of threat that would disturb, you know, the public order, or to as the law mentioned, like use of force or violence or threat that aims to disturb general order or harm national unity. So the language here is like, you know, is loose. This would qualify any act of opposition or protest as terrorism that would require, you know, prosecution in a specialized, you know, judicial panel. And then in October 2014, the military or the regime actually issued a law that granted, you know, the military authority in order to protect it was like basically public in public institutions or state institutions that actually it's in, like roads and bridges actually included in these kind of state facilities and public institutions, and the law considers these facilities and institutions as strategic institutions. So this any kind of attack on these institutions or facilities would require, including definitely, you know, any form of protest. This would grant, you know, the military an authority in order to have this kind of military trials to try civilians that they actually represent, you know, a threat, or they undertake any attack on these strategic institutions. And like the even like the cyberspace as like an avenue of, like, you know, expressing challenges or vocalizing, you know, opposition. So the regime actually had like this anti-cyber and information technology crimes law. So according to this law, it actually penalizes, you know, kind of online, you know, expression or online challenges, and this would it actually enabled the government or the regime to block or to close, you know, any kind of independent media outlets and the websites of different human rights organizations. And the regime actually the first stage to have like a new constitution that like would have like the framework, or would enable, you know, the new regime to extend or to consolidate, you know, it's to have like a constitutional foundation for the authority consolidation, or for these kind of new repressive turn. So the constitution of 2014, it didn't actually bring like significant changes, you know, with regard to the prerogatives, the constitutional prerogatives of the president. It came later with the constitutional amendments of 2019. But so actually the regime, like, or the presidency, it became like a central in the central institution of the state, but slowly actually it has gained, you know, its power slowly, not like, you know, right after the removal of the brotherhood president, or right after 2013 moment. So the central or the main features, you know, of this constitution, it had like some sort of extensive changes as well, but like the core, like the core articles, you know, regarding, you know, the protection, you know, offered, or the provisions, you know, that guaranteed the autonomy of the military, it remained the same. So they had like the two essential components, like the Minister of Defense that required, you know, the approval of the SCAF, not the president, and then the autonomy of the budget as well. So they remained the same. So they had like, you know, like some sort of like, you know, some changes, like, you know, in the constitution of the Brotherhood Constitution of 2015 actually restricted as well the president's authority to declare, you know, the state of emergency. So according to the old constitution, the new constitution actually reduced, you know, this emergency period to 3 months. It was like 6 months under the Brotherhood Constitution, and to be extended, you know, for the same period after the approval of the parliament. So they had like, you know, some sort of changes, but when it comes to the core issues, or the core articles with regard to the military, it remained, you know, the provisions remained the same. That was like, you know, the cornerstone, or the main features of the 2012 constitution remained the same. So another, like, you know, difference perhaps, like the military course, like the domain or the scope of the trials. So again, like, you know, the article 2 204 within the 2014 constitution So according to this, it asserted as well like the autonomy of the military court, and it gave it, it's still like the military courts have like jurisdiction, to try civilians in issues or in that committed crimes, relating to the military. But the 2014 constitution, it added like one clause that actually like the military courts would adjudicate, crimes relating to the military establishment or the armed forces, and because they're kind of represent kind of direct assault on these military facilities. These kind of a word direct, it was like eliminated in the constitutional amendments. So it added this kind of sentence, was added in the 2014 constitution, but eliminated later in 2019 with the constitutional amendments. But again, like the 2014 actually, as like the 2012 constitution, left to the law, to define, the jurisdiction or the scope, of the crimes, or the law would determine, the competencies, of the military courts or judicial authority. So and again, of course, like the military courts, are autonomous and are immune to any kind of dismissal. So it actually one more difference, with regard to like the military courts, the scope or the assertion, of its jurisdiction or the adjudication, of the crimes, relating to the armed forces, by adding, this sentence to be removed later in 2019. Yeah. So as I mentioned last lecture, it was clear that the military became like the center or the backbone, of the regime. It carefully managed or like the installation of the new regime, from like ousting the Brotherhood affiliated president, through writing the constitution through a committee that included some civilian figures and judicial and other experts as well, but like carefully managed by the military, and it had like the same veto power to veto any kind of clauses that would undermine its autonomy. So then, like after like the establishment of the new regime in 2014, so the relationship between like the president and the military was kind of organized, and in terms of like protecting the military officers or the military establishment, and at the same time like eliminating or neutralizing any sort of political threat would come from the military establishment. So firstly, like there is kind of a law that like it's issued in July 2018. So according to this law, it was like so first through the appointment. So the president actually controlled the military through like as an institution. The presidency has like an authority to appoint this high ranking officers. So this would enable the president to appoint the like in key places the supporters or his supporters or his allies, and this would like neutralize or eliminate any potential threat would come from the institution or the establishment. So by like positioning in key or placing in key positions allies and supporters, so this would eliminate any source of threat. So in July there is kind of a law that actually legally prohibits any kind of active or reserve military officers from holding office, from like getting into politics or playing politics. So then the law actually the law ratified or promulgated or issued by the regime, it actually calls upon senior army officers to serve in the military for life, even if they have already resigned their military posts and rejoined the civilian workforce. So the law actually would consider them, as like, army officers, and this like effectively and technically would prevent them from playing politics or holding office. So that was actually the legal foundation upon which, the Sami Anan was disqualified and actually was forced out of the presidential race in 2018. So it was like protection plus, like, like to protect them, protecting them, because it offered, like, the law actually offered them as well, like, safe exit, from politics or from power. It offered them like immunity, like the law called like the treatment of senior military officers, of the armed forces. So the law actually offered them protection through, like, offering, immunity to senior military officers or personnel for, according to quote unquote, for any accusation of mass repression or financial corruption. So this would actually offer them, like, an exit or escape, through this military immunity from any or from being tried, in any civilian court for, like, suppressing, some demonstrations, especially, like, the dispersal of the sit-ins, or like it happened, like, some clashes, it was called like the Republican Guard incidents as well. So this would enable, like, they were not, like, there is no chance, to try them in civilian courts or for any kind of financial issues or financial corruption. So it was like offering some sort of legal protection while politically neutralizing them as well, or establishing control of the presidency over the military establishment to neutralize its like political role. With, like, the elite composition or the elite background, so the regime actually enabled, parliamentary elections in 2015. Like some some characteristics, of the parliament that actually emerged, out of these elections. So the regime had like a new law, electoral law, that actually weakened even more, the role of the political parties, and increased the role of the political or like politically connected, individuals, or the individuals that they had, like, kind of like security approval, or in addition to, like, former security and intelligence officials as well. So according to the new law, so roughly, like, it was like 79% of the seats. If you remember, it was like, 2/3 in the one under the Brotherhood. It was like, 2/3 through, like, this closed the proportional representation party lists, and then 1/3, for these individual candidates. So here the law actually 79% of the seats, it was like, the competition, the competition would throw, like, these kind of individual candidates in a single or multi-member districts. And again, like, the presidential presidential appointment increased to 28, but this is not like significant change. But the most important thing is the electoral law that increased, the influence of individuals or independents, and this actually gave way to pro-Sisi supporters, to dominate the parliament. So most of the seats actually were like won by, his supporters, and there is, like, one party list. Sameh Saif al-Yazal, actually one of the, like, one figure that is like, acceptable to the security apparatus. They had like this party list called For the Love of Egypt. So they had like, their own like, party list that ran for the elections. And this actually confirmed, the very presence or the control of the security or the intelligence apparatuses over, or the management of these apparatuses, of the electoral dynamics and their control over. Like former like military and police intelligence officers, they occupied 1/10 of the parliamentary of the parliament. They took like 1/10 of the seats. And for the role of the private sectors, and I'm gonna talk about this like next lecture. Perhaps like I need like 20 minutes or something about state business relationships and these kind of political settlements. So they had like 140 parliamentarians, they came from the private sector, but the most important thing, they were not like, from the private sector or the firms that they were connected with the NDP or with the Mubarak regime. So most of them, like all the businessmen or the business groups actually, they were not allowed to retain, any political voice or political influence, or to have any say in decision making, in economic decision making process. So they still like retain their like, the large assets and market shares, that like, because this is very like mandatory or necessary for economic recovery, but they were not allowed, to play politics or to have any kind of political influence. And again, the higher elections committee actually is the one, is like the body that's responsible for addressing, any kind of electoral disputes, and they allowed, the Court of Cassation to adjudicate, these electoral disputes. But again, it was like, carefully managed, by the state apparatus. And this kind of depoliticization enabled actually the parliament to promulgate, any laws or policies that actually they are not popular, for example. So to rubber stamp basically for the any kind of policies or decisions, taken by the president. So the most important, measures, that like resulted from this form of depoliticization was this kind of implementation of austerity policies, like without any kind of negotiation or debate with social forces, and without having like significant, political opposition inside the parliament to question or to hold, the like the executive, accountable for these policies. So the regime actually implemented, these policies that like went kind of uncontested. In order to attract, it was like initially started in November 2016 in order to attract the IMF loans, and then like, devaluing, the Egyptian pound, that actually lost like, from 40 to 50% of its value overnight after like, the decision of the floating of the Egyptian pound, and then like liberalizing, the fuel prices as well, like, lifting or abolishing, any sort of subsidies that actually Mubarak, the Mubarak's regime, or the figures, under Mubarak's regime, actually they were cautious, or they had kind of fears, of implementing these kind of policies out of fear of popular discontent or mass uprisings or mobilizations. So the second term actually, it was kind of continuation of the first term, and this actually enabled the regime like to continue with the policies actually started in 2013 and 14. So the elections actually had no kind of viable candidates. So all like Shafi and Anan, they were pressured or forced out of the presidential elections, and then the Sisi had like he was like faced by only one candidate that actually he once declared, you know, his support, or his party actually declared its support to Sisi before. So it was like it had like no viable, you know, candidate, or no meaningful kind of contestation. So this actually enabled him to continue, or to have like, you know, his second term. And in a year, the regime actually undertook like, you know, extensive constitutional amendments, and these like the central components, or the central elements, or the main target of these constitutional amendments, basically, or to strengthen the president control over judicial authority. This is like on the one important element. And the second element is to like to assign kind of authorities or duties, you know, to the military, in order to like to protect, you know, the constitution. It's kind of like like offering authority, or empowering it to have like, you know, an authority that was actually, these authorities, you know, were actually assigned to some civilian bodies, you know, that actually account in charge of implementing or enforcing laws and rules. So this actually to assign, you know, some duty to the military in order to protect, you know, the constitution and democracy, and to protect, you know, the civilian nature of the states and the individual and citizenship rights. So these are like the most important, and of course, like the strengthening the presidential control over the judicial branch, and extending, you know, the presidential terms as well, that allowed the Sisi to increase, you know, the term to 6 years, and to run for one more term as well. So these are, you know, the articles that actually the first like three ones, like 185, 89, and 93, these actually offered the president, you know, this broad and unchecked, you know, authorities over the judicial branch and the public prosecutor. So the president actually will have the authority to appoint the public, you know, prosecutor, and the heads, you know, of the judicial bodies. This actually undermines, you know, the principle of the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary. So so this actually erode, you know, the individual rights to have like fair trial by impartial and competent, you know, courts, or like, you know, judicial panel. So there's like, you know, clear kind of violation, you know, of the rule of law and the impartiality of the judicial authority. And there's like, you know, again, like, you know, increase, you know, the control of the executive or the president, you know, most especially over the judicial branch. And then articles 200 to 204 and 234, this would actually expanded, you know, the military interference or authority in civilian affairs and in public sphere. So you have like the phrasing actually. So the military actually takes responsibilities, as I mentioned, of some civilian law enforcement agencies in order to protect the constitution and democracy and safeguard the basic components of the state and its civilian nature and the people's gains and the individual rights and freedoms. So this actually empowered or the military in order to take responsibilities or undermine, you know, the authorities of the civilian law enforcement bodies. So in addition to, like, you know, its mandate, you know, to protect the country from any external threat and to preserve, you know, the security and the territories. So the most important, like article as well, it was like the jurisdiction of the military tribunals that actually include crimes that represent an assault against military facilities, equipment, weapons, documents, and public funds, removing the pre-amendment, requirement that said, as I mentioned, direct assault. So it did not exist, in the 2012 constitution, and then added, in 2014, and then removed, in 2019 amendment. So, and then like the article 140 and a transitional one 240 that actually the article extends, the presidential term, and then the transitional one enabled the Sisi, to end, his tenure after 6 years, and to allow him kind of re-elections for another 6-year term. So you have here like the phrasing of the amended articles. Guys, do you have any question?
No, we don't. Thank you.
Okay. So I have like, a quick question. We have like, 5 minutes before we start our presentations. So from what I've said, can you like, tease out kind of similarities and differences between 2014 or the new like regime that emerged in 2014 and Nasser? Because like, there's kind of like some articles, and especially like, the 2013 moment, they draw parallel between, Nasser and Sisi, and then the Sisi regime and Nasser regime as well. Can you guys make up your mind regarding, the differences or any kind of similarities between both of them?
I think the main similarity that's often touted is that like Nasser, Sisi is more like his stance with the Muslim Brotherhood, where he's been trying to eliminate their branches and try to basically try and eliminate the Muslim Brotherhood presence from Egypt. I think that's the main focus of why people are comparing Nasser and Sisi, because they basically both try to destroy the organization. Even though I think like both of them made use of the organization. So like the Nasser with the free officers used the Muslim Brotherhood to help them oust the monarchy, and Sisi was, I believe, was appointed by the Muslim Brotherhood as like in his position after they removed Tantawi.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the main difference is actually, and there's also the similarity in that they both as well afterwards kind of instituted like a military government, like a military government, and then rolled in civilian, like limited civilian governance that were still subordinate to them.
Mm-hmm.
So as to prevent any uprising. But I think the main difference is in the general.
But Mahmoud as well, like Nasser as El Sisi, they tried to neutralize the military politically.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like Nasser believed like he had multiple like you could like I guess you could call it like purges to try and eliminate any. I mean, like for example with with Naguib and others, where he and his constant changing of the vice presidency. So Nasser constantly tried to remove any possible threat from within the military. The
Mm-hmm.
same with Sisi, like you mentioned, how if you were like basically like that you are designated as a military officer, even if you leave the military.
Mm-hmm.
So it basically kind of prevents you from running for presidency or for high government positions positions to challenge him. I guess like the main, I mean, they are very similar in the form of control that they are trying to impose on the government, and the way they run the government itself. That's how they're very similar. They're only different in the policies itself.
Yeah, and as well, like, you know, they don't depend. If you remember, even Nasser, they didn't rely heavily on these kind of mass rallies and these kind of mass mobilizations, but he needed especially, you know, laborers in order to establish, you know, wide social basis. So here the main reliance is on like state institutions. Like instead of like, you know, reincarnating, you know, the old regime, the regime actually depended on the existing institutions, most especially the intelligence and the security apparatuses, instead of having like Ittihad Ishtiraki, like the Arab Socialist Union, or like another ruling, you know, political party, in order to offer like, you know, kind of a civilian foundation or recruitable, you know, base for the regime's elites. So they don't like, you know, they have like, you know, this kind of anti-political, you know, stand, like instead of like even having like, you know, the appearance, you know, of these kind of mass rallies or ruling parties. The regime actually hasn't depended on these organizations or institutions. They actually like the Sisi regime and as a president and his ruling or his supporters, they actually bring together, you know, different elements from or different apparatuses from like, you know, existing institutions or from the existing, you know, well-established state, and they govern through, you know, these apparatuses. And like another point, like Nasser, like the rhetoric and the ideology of like this social justice and equality, it's totally absent here. So there is no kind of social contract kind of that Nasser had, you know, with the popular forces, most especially. So it's basically like, you know, austerity measures and conservative, you know, social and economic policies that had like, you know, nothing to do with the legacy of Nasserism. So like the central feature or the central element of the current regime is like the president in the presidency as like an institution. So it's kind of a stronger presidency as the central feature, and the dependence on the state institutions, especially like the security and the intelligence, as like, you know, it would offer, you know, the foundation of and the background for the current elites. We're gonna hopefully you can have like, you know, you can take a look at the Wan's chapter. It's basically it's not about Egypt. He actually tried to put Egypt in kind of comparative perspectives about, you know, the state business relations and what form of what kind of political settlement these regimes might have. It's Egypt in the middle, not only Egypt, it's generally in the Middle East, with some examples and some mentions kind of to the Egyptian case. So it would be interesting if you can like, you know, take a look at it, and we can like, you know, have like a short discussion about it next lecture, in addition to the presentation. And I will have like 15 minutes or 20 minutes, you know, to cover, you know, the idea, you know, he tried, you know, to bring up, and then we can have like, you know, your presentations, you know, for the rest of the lecture. Okay.
Okay.
So do you have any questions so far? Yeah, for guys, for your bonus, I've received about the word limit. It's I think like you can answer this in 2,000 words, and it will be okay. And I'm gonna post like an announcement on Blackboard as well. So have you started already?
Yes.
Who is talking? Farida?
لا سهيلة.
Wahila, yeah.
بس دكتور أنا عندي سؤال.
Yeah.
About the format of the bonus. Should it يعني it contain introduction body paragraphs ولا
It's
paragraphs?
yeah, it's like a take home. Yeah, it's like the same form. It's an essay form, like the take home exam.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So yeah.
Sorry, can you briefly, very quickly mention what you just said because my internet was unstable. I couldn't hear.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. You
No,
need
I was
you need
asking.
to recap the about what about the word limit.
Yes.
Yeah, I mentioned something about the question. It would be like, you know, you can answer this in 2,000 words.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. If you, yeah, 2,000, I think, yeah, 2,000 would be enough, you know, to cover, you know, all the points. But guys, like, make sure you do like the readings carefully. Okay. And if you don't understand something in the question, just get it. Don't ask me, I can write this or not. Don't ask me about your answer. But if you have something unclear, you know, in the question, so please get in touch with me.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we have only like Mustafa's not here, right? No. So we have only Mahmoud. Mahmoud,
Yes.
do you have like PowerPoint? So you need to share your.
No, I'll just present it in a discussion format.
Okay. Okay. So Mahmoud, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my term paper was on was looking at the constitutional monarchy of Egypt and answering the question of why the so-called liberal experiment failed and how did that failure lead to the rise of the free officers. And like formulating my thesis, I based it around three main factors that the first being the socio-economic disparities within Egypt at the time during the 20s, 30s, and 40s. The major talking point was also the political infighting and the political sphere of Egypt. It was extremely fragile, and I'll get to that as well. And there was the rising rising role of the military that paved the way for the free officers.
Mm-hmm.
So for the socioeconomic, I mainly looked at the secondary sources, the journal articles, but I did look up statistics to show the makeup of society, especially the comparisons between how much land was owned by the large families compared to the rest of the population. I also tried to look at the differences in wealth and in the position of the position of those elites, those wealthy elites within government, and how they enjoyed more privileges, how they enjoyed more benefits compared, and how they were able to get away with more corruption, as well as the role of the Wafd and the government in their policies that were such as land reform and land and social reform that was largely actually ignored until 1950, in which case it became a facade. And all the broken promises. That was mainly the socioeconomic, but in the political like in the political factor, I found I looked at like again other journal articles, but also I took your feedback and I looked at the 1923 Constitution. I found a version online.
Mm-hmm.
And I read most of the articles. There were multiple articles that showed or that explicitly stated that the king had certain excessive powers for a liberal constitution. So, for example, the king could appoint and remove ministers. The king could dissolve government. And again, as well, the political situation also, and in the liberal age, there was also a massive corruption within the political sphere, especially within the West. I found again something called the black. I mean, I found in one of the readings something called the Black Book.
Yeah.
That was on my Makram Abe that showed the extent of Mustafa Nahas's corruption, and There was also a lot of political violence during this time, either from riots or from assassinations, especially assassinations, where the Muslim Brotherhood, the Wafdists, and even there are also rumors that, or like I saw rumors that that those tied with the king himself were also involved in assassination plots and attempts. That again also kind of undid the liberal order. And then finally, as well, the British themselves, that they were influencing parliament, influencing the government, most notably in the 1952 Abdin incident, where they tried to appoint a Wafd government. So that as well, I found that that basically removed any sovereignty over Egypt's internal politics. And then finally, with the military, I looked at two primary sources. The first being an interview by Saad al-Din al-Shazili, who was like an Egyptian field marshal during the 1973 war, and he was he basically gives his experience with the military academies when he entered in the 30s and the 1948 war, which would show that military academies were mainly like administered by foreign and British officers, and that was reaffirmed again when I looked at I found a House of Commons debate from 1936 after the Anglo-Egyptian Treaty that kind of talked about the military academies as well, and how the British controlled it, and how the British also had the ability to administer martial law if they felt Egypt was threatened. And with the 1948 war, I found that the free officers, the free officers were rising in the military academies, like Nasser and becoming an instructor. And then in 1948 war, they basically were reaffirmed in their anti-British, anti-government position when the government basically had failed spectacularly to in their objectives and were defeated by a much smaller militia. I think at the time Egypt had a population of 30 million and the Jewish community was 100,000. So that was a big shock to the free officers. And basically, from my term paper, I found that, like I said in the thesis,
Mahmoud,
yes?
before wrapping up, so can you please tell us like the question you answered?
Yeah. So the question was, why did the liberal experiment fail, and how did it lead to the rise of the free officers and the Egyptian Republic?
Okay, the failure of the liberal experiment and the paving the way for the free officers.
Yeah, so and I basically looked at it from the social economic perspective, the political perspective, and how the free officers rose through the military experiences and military and the military weakness of the Egyptian monarchy. And that was and that's basically it. And I may looked at three primary sources and multiple secondary sources.
Okay, guys, do you have any question? Okay, I have like a minor like comment. How did you link like the socioeconomic situation in Egypt back then with the failure of the experiment? It's like rising anger and discontent against the Wafd because of the lack of the social justice or the implementation of social and economic policies.
Yeah, it was partly
or undermining the popularity of the Wafd, or supporting the free officers when they took over power.
It was through like it was through many two avenues. First, like the disillusionment of the general population with, or like the majority of the population with the Wafd and the government. I mean, the government as a liberal order was supposed to be like in theory representative of the people, especially the nationalist Wafd. But as I show and make the argument in the term paper, the makeup of the Wafd was largely elitist, that often pushed for policies that benefited themselves and were highly corrupt, while the only policies that they ever pushed for large popular reforms were only promised in 1950 after nearly 30 years of rule. So that's after 30 years of rule, yeah. So that So there was really a large disillusionment with the liberal order, which kind of paved the way for which in effect was something that the free officers would later, and I said this in the term paper, that they would later be able to use to their advantage to see where the liberal order failed and to take advantage of that.
Oh, okay.
Liberal order failed to reform, so the free officers would utilize reforms to push their agenda.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Mahmoud.
You're welcome.
Okay. So guys, so we are going to have like our last lecture on Thursday. So please make sure that you stick to like, 7-minute presentations. And like, if you have like, if you read like the one's chapter, it would be like, nice to have like, discussion about it, because we don't have like extensive literature, that covers, the Sisi regime. So we are going to have like, some sort of like, theorizing, attempt to investigate, the relationship between state and society by like breaking down, the society into some elements and focusing here on the business community, especially. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, see you on Thursday. Bye.
See you. Bye.
Thank you.